Welcome back to another episode. It's your boy Donna.
And it's your girl C.
And this is the Winfrey Affair podcast. Another episode of the Winfrey Affair. It's your boy Dono, and today we are on season 2, episode 3, which is called Childhood Trauma. It can also be family trauma. But before we get into that, we're going to get into promotion time. Yes, promo time.
Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media platforms.
Social media platforms consist of Instagram, Facebook. Oh yeah, it's also season 2 will be uploaded on YouTube. So let's beef up the subscribers.
And speaking of subscribers, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and follow us on SoundCloud and Spotify.
Now let's tune back in.
All right, guys. So like we said earlier, today's topic is about childhood trauma. And I want you to bring out your notepads, yes. And I really want you to tune into today's episode. Absolutely. Because not only is this going to help out us in our relationships and in our marriages, yes. But this also today affects our children. Oh, yeah. And our seed and our legacy and the generations after them. Oh, yeah. And what the generations before us. And the generations before us as well, absolutely. Yeah. And what we want to achieve is a healthy community. Yes. That is aware of some of these things that cause unhealthy mental just unhealthy mental practices, honestly. Yeah. So we're going to jump right into it today. So what is childhood trauma? I know a lot of times we think that childhood trauma is just something that could happen to little children, mm-hmm. But childhood trauma can honestly affect anybody from ages from a baby all the way up to 18, 19 years old. So there's a wide variety of ages that can be impacted by this. And when I say trauma, I don't mean probably the most traumatic thing that you can think of. Absolutely. I mean the smallest things.
The things that we live with.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later on in this episode. But first, I want to talk to you about when the brain is the most critically impacted by some of these things, because if we can learn when our children's brains are the most impacted, then I truly believe that we can stop them from experiencing some of the things and growing up to be more mentally stable people, So the first 5 years are the most important in the child's brain. That's when they're learning how to read, how to write, how to talk. But it's also when they're learning what is their communication style, what is their personality, who am I, as little Susie or little Bobby, who am I most comfortable with? Mm-hmm. How do I eat? How do I walk? That's just where they're learning so much about themselves. Exactly. And they're the most influenced between those ages. Yeah. So again, I'll say it again, birth to 5 years old. Birth to 5 years old. Keep that in mind as we continue to go into Don keeps repeating everything.
I'm going to repeat everything she say now. Come on.
Keep that in mind as we go a little bit further in this episode, because I'll show you and we'll explain how that ties in as well. So age birth to 5, that's when the child is most developed in their brain, right? Mm-hmm. If you take an early brain development or early childhood education, they talk a lot about this because this is when the child is most influenced. Now, the child is still influenced on ages on up, but this is where things start getting imprinted. Yeah. It's almost like how they have when the ducks are first born and when they're first hatched, the first thing they see, that's who they're imprinted on. That's their mama. So it's like that's when the child's brain is most imprinted on what we say as adults, what we do as adults, whoever is around them at that moment. That's what they're going to pick up, whether it be good habits, bad habits, definitely bad habits, bad communication skills, good communication skills. That is what the child is going to begin to play out, and that's what they're going to base their personality on.
Right.
So what sorts of things can impact a child during that time?
I believe one of the things that can impact during that time of being a child is, I think it's just the environment. There are studies showing that, children who are brought up in more poverty, lower income environments tend to produce criminals, thugs, basically like the blacklisted people on earth. I mean, honestly, we're statistics that go against that because, even though we lived in those environments, we have to understand men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie.
Right.
You have to be careful where some of these statistics are coming from. Some of this can be birthed out of fear.
Yeah.
But I do believe trauma I believe it starts at home. And it's I believe it's introduced at home. Then it's expressed through everyday life once they leave home.
Absolutely.
And they see it in school.
Absolutely.
And they'll see it in after school programs.
Absolutely.
They see it at the grocery store. They see it. And a lot of times, and like I said, I'm not just talking about pulling guns on older women. I'm not talking about just going. I know it's pretty bizarre for me to say that, but I've had experience where I've seen that before. But like that thing that shaped you. But you're in environments, like I said, at that earlier age. I believe it starts in the home, and more so, like for instance, if you grow up in a 2-parent household, a lot of people think that you're more unsusceptible of being a criminal or delinquent.
Right.
When a lot of times now that number's changed over the period of time, because used to be it was just if you was a single parent, it's just doom and gloom. Now those children are more successful than the kids who have 2 parents. So I think like I said, it really just depends on the genetic makeup of that child, or the genealogy of that family tree.
Absolutely.
Just depending on whatever their struggles were, whatever doors were opened up during that time. So specifically for that last name. So I think that's one of the ways that can impact the child at that time. So.
Definitely. And to piggyback off of you, environment.
Yeah.
It primarily, today's episode is really going to be focused on the home.
Yeah.
And what a child sees at home, because that's where it all starts.
Absolutely.
And like he said, it just goes back to what are you doing at home?
Yeah.
What does this child see at home?
Yeah.
I've been in the education field for 8.5 years, probably more. I don't know.
No.
But I've seen so much. Primarily, the age group that I work with is pre-K. Well, I work with all the age groups.
Yeah.
I work in a school. But,
Yeah.
but the primary age group that I usually work with is kindergartners.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those children are usually all right around 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
Now, you probably would not know this, but there is so much personality in these kids.
Yeah.
That
potato.
It's so much personality in these kids just at an early age like that you can almost pinpoint, okay, they have a dysfunctional household. They have this going on. And if you really just listen, they'll tell you.
Yeah.
They will tell you what's going on. This person over here is doing this. And it's like you can see how it's shaping their personality even at such an early age. Just from them coming straight from home, now they're into this school environment. Yeah. Some of them do not know how to communicate at all. Some of them know how to communicate, but only through tantrums. Some of them know they don't know how to express how they feel, and so they lash out and flip over desks. Yes, kindergartens flip over desks. So it's just all of this starts at home.
Right.
Now, what are some of the things that a child can see that may shape them negatively?
Yeah. And I know a lot of times, great question, by the way. And I know a lot of times people automatically think, it's the children being around drugs, being around environments with guns. But a lot of times it could just be, like you said, unhealthy communication.
Absolutely.
The fact that if there is a mother, or not mother, but if there's a male and a female in a household, how they communicate with each other, how they commune with each other, how they interact with each other. A lot of times, some of us may probably haven't grew up in abusive environments. It probably could have just been the fact that, hey, my dad was always at work. And or my mom was always at work, and I grew up with one side than the other, rather than having both a part of the family structure. So I think, like I said, sometimes it could just be a negligence. It could be the fact of if something is going on in the household, you're told not to say anything. It goes to what goes on in this house stays in this house, and that's why everybody in the house is crazy, and nobody can progress past that level of trauma that happened at that moment. So
absolutely,
they'll develop, they'll grow to that stage as a body, but emotionally, mentally, they're still stuck at that age of 6 years old when that situation took place. So I think. Like I said, these are just examples, of things that, we had to walk through our own counseling and therapy sessions that we had to take. And we realized, with our own tragedy of losing our daughter, a lot of things that they dealt with me was, how did I handle pressure? How do I handle life during those times? And what would I do with it? Because, it wasn't like we were exposed to counselors and therapists. Absolutely. And at our age, she was like, they was like, you going to see a shrink? That's they were kind of brought up in that, like, that old school mentality. But that was, like I say, it was a learning curve for me. But I think it showed me, like, how did I cope? That's the word. How did I cope with these things? How do I react to these things? A lot of times I would just shut down. I would just be numb, like just try to act like it didn't bother me and faze me, but because I didn't want the world to see that it hurt me. And I think as a man, sometimes we have this ability to try to mask up everything, try to be strong for everyone else but ourselves. Right. That's why we, some of them are slacking off. Right. But I just feel like it's one of the ways, and really just don't what happens in this house stays in this house. Stays in this house mentality has to stop. Yeah, it because does. We're producing now another level of another generation of craziness. Yeah, and it's actually being exposed because now it's on cameras now. Yep. So, yeah, it's toxic. It's very toxic. It's a new level of toxic that absolutely that creates. So now that we've talked about a little bit there, and this topic can go so many ways. Yes. We're choosing to just stay with just one lane. Yeah. But there is so many different lanes that childhood trauma can take. Yeah. That it's almost scary. Oh, another way it shows up too? I believe another way it shows up is incorrection. When you correcting your spouse. And I know a lot of times, like there were times because, being transparent, there were times, the way that I grew up in our household, I didn't know how to take correction from, I want to be careful of using the word abuse, more so like verbal abuse, I would say. Because in our earlier years of marriage, we had a bad level of communication. And the only time we would talk was through arguments. And because I was raised up on the arguments, I was raised up in an environment where, not all the time, but majority of the time, it seemed like something was going on. Yeah. It kind of produced like a level of fear in me where it's like either it's a fight or flight mentality. Right. It's like either I'm going to run away, which I usually did. I would literally get in my car and be out for like 6 hours? 6 to 8 hours. 6 to 8 hours. And a lot of times I'll tell you, like I would literally just sit in the park and try to talk it to myself, but not talk about it to my spouse. So a lot of times, like I said, when it comes to having healthy confrontation, communication, like forced communication, having forceful communication to where you have to talk about it, that was never done in my household. And I knew it was going to be a fight or flight situation. And that's actually one of the one of the areas that we were actually going to talk about. Oh, so I guess I'm sorry. Kind of let the cat out of the bag, but yeah. But I guess that we can go ahead and dive into that. Yeah. And basically talk about how childhood trauma affects us as adults first, before we even get into any relationships, period. I have to say that there was a lot of secrecy in my household, and there was a lot of, we don't really deal with the problem, we beat around the bush. And it was, growing up in that type of environment, you saw the crazy, you saw the dysfunctional stuff happening, you saw all, and then it was just like nobody would ever talk about it. Like
it was just like it never happened. And I grew up thinking, you know what? If something's wrong, I'm just going to act like it never happened.
Yeah.
I'm going to wake up the next day. Oh, people probably thought that I was crazy because it would just be like, nope. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to acknowledge anything.
Yes.
And we're just going to let this just fade on out in the background and just never revisit this again.
Yeah.
But what I wasn't realizing was that I was causing myself to have like this buildup of anxiety inside of me, because it would just be like, I knew, hold on, wait a minute now. That don't add up. But you know what? I'm not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And those were feelings and emotions that I was feeling in those particular moments that I was shoving down consistently over the years, shoving down, just shoving it down until one day I literally just had a mental breakdown.
Yep.
And I just, and it was over the smallest thing. I know it was in college. I don't remember what it was about, but I just remember sitting in my dorm room and just crying. And I cried literally for 3 days straight. I woke up crying. Yeah. I went to sleep crying 3 days straight. That wasn't because of, I think it was a breakup that I had. And it was just like, all of these emotions just came out. I was angry. I was hurt. I was confused. I was sad. My brain was just a jumbled mess. I could not understand what was happening with me.
True.
And it was just like, it was just one of those moments where you're just like, why am I even crying at this moment?
Yeah.
But before then, I would try to make it a point, don't cry.
Yeah.
Don't let that touch you. Don't feel anything, because if you feel anything, they're going to call you soft. They're going to call you weak. And that's another thing too. We have to watch what we speak over our children.
Talk about it.
We have to watch what we speak over them, because they carry that into their adulthood.
They do.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
I carried that into my adulthood, and I was made to feel by being called, oh, you're always emotional. You're always crying. You're always doing this.
Yeah. I
was made to feel like my feelings were wrong.
Whew.
I was made to feel that way.
Right.
And so I purposed in my heart to become cold-hearted.
Wow.
So that I wouldn't feel anything and be made fun of because I felt.
Yeah.
That's so dysfunctional.
Very dysfunctional. And I know that's coming within the family.
Exactly.
It's not the external, it was the family.
It was within the family.
Within the family. That could be very interesting.
And it definitely, honestly, that even carried over into my marriage.
Uh-oh.
That even carried over into my marriage. So we have to watch what we speak
we do.
over our children. If you don't get anything else out of this episode, get this. Be careful what you speak over your child. You do not know how many times I have been teaching a child and they get one problem wrong and they'll say, I'm so stupid.
Yeah.
I'm not smart. I can't get this. I'll never be able to do this. And I'll say, no, you can do this. No, I can't, because mommy told me that I'm stupid. Mommy told you you're stupid.
Wow.
You do not understand the amount of heartbreak that I felt on a daily basis when I would hear children, kindergartners, little 4 and 5-year-olds repeating that.
And you know they don't know what that
means. And you know they don't know what it means, but yet they somehow know how to act it out. Children are like sponges.
That's good.
They soak up everything that you speak over them.
Good and bad.
Good and bad.
That's very interesting that you say that about the child. But also too, it's also important to know like what you speak over your spouse. Because a lot of times I had that really bad with the name calling. Because I was very like oh, she ain't gonna do this, she ain't gonna do that. And it turned out a lot of times she wouldn't be able to do those things because I spoke it. Like you said, you know, scripture says there's life and death in the power of the tongue. Absolutely. Or death and life in the power of the tongue. The tongue is one of the unruly members in the body. Something that has to be tamed.
Absolutely.
That's why, you know, you will hear I forgot the prophet, but it says, put a watch over my mouth.
Absolutely.
Knowing what to say and how to communicate what you're saying. A lot of times it's not what you say, it's how you present it. Because a lot of times it could be that frustration, it could be the anger of the present moment, it could be the pain in that moment. But I think a lot of times it's just knowing how to effectively speak to your spouse. But how do you know how to speak to your spouse if you never were spoke to correctly as a child?
As a child, absolutely.
I think this is something that we have to continue to journey towards, even though, like I said, it wasn't our fault that the way that we were raised up, but it is our responsibility to make sure that we get better ourselves.
Absolutely.
Then we're able to help out the next generation. If you don't help yourself, you're going to burn yourself out, and you're actually going to do damage to that next generation, to your children, to their children. And this is going to be another cycle that's going on. It's going to be like, what are we here for? You know, like I know a lot of people saying, oh, I'm trying to break generational curses. It's like, no, you get money doesn't mean that you're breaking generational curses.
Absolutely.
You could still be a cursed individual who's a millionaire.
Yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it doesn't mean, no, you're wealthy financially. That's great. But it's just like, you know, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, if you're not aware, if you're not holistic, you know, you're in your mind, will, and emotions, you know, if you're not whole, hey, you're just gonna create another cycle.
Absolutely.
That's just kind of like where it is right there. So
absolutely. And so that's just us as adults.
You
know, and my husband just touched on it. Literally, it can affect the way that we talk to our children, the way that we talk to our spouse, even the way that we have friendships. It can affect literally things that happen to us as a child can affect our relationships. And that's one of the things that I realized, you know, like a few years ago?
Yeah.
How you were raised up can definitely affect your relationships. And when I say relationships, I mean in every aspect. Yeah. Work relationships, business relationships, friendships, boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, marriage, child to parent, like any relationship that you can think of, that can be affected.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I realized too is that how we saw our parents deal with relationships is 9 times out of 10 how we go about our relationships. Yep. So let's say that you had parents that were very isolated. They did not have friends. They talked about everybody. They gossiped about everybody. They didn't like anybody. That's usually how you're going to view your relationships. Yeah. Now, I won't say it's all the time. Yeah. Because, you know, we can realize, my parents have a problem, you know, or something like that, or whoever was watching me had a problem with, you know, having friends, and we can change that. Yeah. But we have to think about what we saw. Yeah. You know, in my case, the women in my family don't really have friends as far as other strong-minded women. Mm-hmm. And so we're very strong and independent. Yeah. You know, and it's like, okay. Yeah. We can show ourselves friendly here, people. You know, and I made it in my heart to always come off as friendly, you know, because I want people to know that I'm a friendly person and I want you to be my friend. Right. But I'm also want you to know that I'm going to give you the honest truth. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of times we run away from friendships. Yeah. Because friendships can mirror who you are.
That's powerful right there.
You know, you attract what you are. And so a lot of times if we're dealing with a lot of traumatic events and a lot of toxic events in our life, we try to keep people away. Absolutely. Because we know that people are people. They're going to want to know what's happening. Yeah. They're going to want to be like, are you okay? Yeah. And if we're not ready to deal with it ourselves, how can we bring somebody else in? Or
then, you know, a lot of times too, because, you know, I grew up in a more religious household. Right. We had an anthem that was very known in the 90s. As long as I got King Jesus, I don't need nobody else. And the way that my parents kind of did life, it was just them. Yeah. Like they were a part of like a healthy community. But, you know, when my parents opened up their church, I kind of noticed that the dwindling away of friends. Mm-hmm. And then I started noticing like a lot of bad decision making happened over the years. And then it kind of just slowly started winging off. And now it's kind of like, things are just very desolate, if I could just say it in
Absolutely.
that way. It's very, like I said, I do believe having friendships who are going to hold you accountable for whatever responsibility God has given you, or, just for just the everyday life things is very important.
Very important.
For relationships. That's why I say, even going back to like correction, if you have like, if you were in an environment where you always talk bad about from a parental figure, when you get into like the work environment, someone has to correct you on something, you'll go right back into that little girl in the closet.
Yep.
Who felt so rejected and abandoned, and who felt abused and open, whatever the case may be, and a lot of times we have to talk these things out, man. It's like this notion of just saying, as long as I got King Jesus, I don't need nobody else. That is literally has produced a wave of dysfunctional people within church, within the church, within, I'm speaking directly to the African American church. And I know, like, we don't want to say it, but, a lot of times our parents, they were two-sided, you know what I mean? Like, I had to understand, like, that they were living out their truth, even if it was hurt. Like, they were hurting. They didn't know how to talk about what was right. What we can talk about now. That's what I'm saying. It's not our it's not our fault for what happened, but it is our responsibility to make sure that we're not repeating the same thing.
Absolutely.
It is very important. And like I said, especially for those who grew up in religious environments, who grew up in, Starch, Pentecostal, Baptist, whatever you were, like if you apostolic, I don't know what you were, but like, however you grew up in, like whatever conditions you grew up in, like I said, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal.
Absolutely.
It is your responsibility to heal, and to be aware, then that education can come. Because a lot of times people don't want to actually accept the fact that this happened to me.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I actually went through this as a child. Oh my gosh, this is why I struggle with relationships, because it starts here.
Absolutely.
This is why, the common denominator, I just can't think to have any friends. You're the problem.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, sometimes just the fact that, hey, you know what? You demand too much out of people that you won't even do for yourself.
Absolutely.
So it's like, no, you put everybody on this extreme measure of you gotta get it right the first time or else, or, it's just me and Jesus, and it's like, listen, people, put a break on it. We are all human beings. Okay?
Absolutely.
I understand, we, especially for those who are born again, it is possible and it is okay for you not to get it the first time.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you need help outside of the pulpit. I said that. You need a therapist. You need a counselor. Heck, if you even need a life coach, go get the help that you need.
Absolutely.
Do that thing, seriously. But I'm going to leave that alone right there. But I don't want to get too hype again.
No, you're fine. Because it's so true. It's like even if you deal with a lot of mistrust and betrayal as a child, you're going to carry that into your relationships as an adult. You're not going to trust anybody.
It comes out like this. I think he's cheating on me.
Yep.
And it could just be the fact that he's just working, or
it's a lot of insecurity.
Yeah, a lot of well, I think, and it always starts with the I. I think this, and because you think this, and no one else can assess you, no one else can judge what you're saying from a biblical standpoint. No one can actually say, "Hey, I think you're a little crazy, and I think you need to go to counseling."
And I think you're doing too much.
Yeah, I think and no, I don't know. I don't think he's doing anything. I think he's just going to work.
Absolutely,
it's normal. Okay.
Absolutely.
Jeez.
Like it shows itself in many forms, insecurity, in control, and manipulation.
Yeah.
All of these things start from what we see as a child.
Yeah.
And it affects us as humans.
Absolutely.
And like we touched on before, which we're about to jump into, it affects our marriage. It affects our marriage. And let's say that you have adults or guardians in your life who either were married and had a very great marriage. Yeah. They were healthy. Let's just say that, there are people out here that are trying to aim for healthy marriages.
Absolutely.
Kudos to you. We are so proud of you.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority, It's a very dysfunctional relationship.
Not for the rest of y'all.
It's a very dysfunctional thing that they see, or they don't see a marriage at all.
Right.
Me, I primarily only saw I want to say my parents got married. They were probably the only ones that I saw that were married in my family line.
Right.
You know, there were other few that were married, but then they ended up getting divorced over, other situations. Yeah. And the only ones that I saw were my parents.
Yeah.
And it was that was one example out of a whole load of family.
Yeah. That's it.
And it's just like, so when I got married, I had absolutely no clue.
Yeah.
How to communicate with my spouse,
right.
How to just accept him for who he was, not what I wanted him to be.
Absolutely.
I had no clue how to do anything. So naturally, I went back to things that I always knew. What shaped me as a person? Mm-hmm. Communication-wise, I would just act like stuff didn't happen, like I said earlier. I wanted him to be just like me. I wanted him to... to not be himself. And I had no clue. If it wasn't for the church that we spoke about the last season on this podcast, Lord, but I mean, it definitely affects it definitely affected our marriage. For me, there was definitely a lot of mistrust because I dealt with a lot of rejection and betrayal when I was a child. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of rejection and betrayal that I had in my heart when I got married. True. That was undealt with because, for one, I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't even have the language to understand what it really was.
Right.
And so there would be a lot of times where, there was a specific situation that did end up happening at the beginning of our marriage. And I felt so alone, and I did not know how to communicate that with my husband. So instead, what I did was I shut down.
Yeah.
I shut down, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to be that wife that doesn't say anything. And it was just, that's not the way that you want to build your marriage.
Right.
Because how are you two supposed to advance and grow with each other if one person is walking and the other person is just like sitting on the ground with their legs crossed, throwing a tantrum?
Legs crossed applesauce.
But that was my response as a child on how to deal with pressure and drama and all of that stuff. I would just shut down and act like it didn't happen.
Yeah, shut it down. And a lot of times they'll force that person to play the guessing game.
Absolutely.
And then, what do you expect us to do? Is like, okay, like I can't read your mind. I don't have that gift. It's like, okay, like, hold on, stay still. I got something coming. No, wait, no, that's from yesterday. I don't know. But like I said, I think if anything, it just goes to show you, like she was saying earlier, it's just, these experiences are real, and like I said, trauma is bigger than the external things that we encounter, but it's more so from an internal perspective. That's why it's called insane. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called instability. Mm-hmm. That's why it's called what's the other word? I don't know.
Insecurity.
Insecurity. You know what I'm saying? Because it's something that's done on the inside of you, which makes you exude that everyone has to do this. And I've noticed most of the people who battle with insanity, insecurity, or whatever those other words were in that are in a negative connotation, they always have a form of control.
Absolutely.
They got to control everything around them.
Absolutely.
Because they were so at the child's age, they were vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And that's even just from 0 to 5. I believe it is from 6 to 18, because you look at some of the children now who are walking into adulthood, they're underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And even I'm talking about from a mental and a emotional standpoint.
Absolutely.
I don't think they know how to handle life and the pressures that it have. That's why they involve themselves with drugs. That's why they involve themselves with outwardly things. It's like, so when I see people who are addicted to certain things, I'm not affecting this. I don't want to ask questions about the symptom. Mm-hmm. I want to ask questions about the root. That's why you ask me, okay, so when did this get introduced to you? Why did you feel like this was easier for you to do? And if it's the same thing for a person to do that with alcohol, drugs, or whatever the case may be. It's the same thing for you people who sitting there with all that stuff in your heart and you don't talk about it. And
Absolutely.
we know that you over there bottle up with that stuff, but you don't want to say it. But it shows in how you interact with life. You're so guarded.
Mm-hmm.
You're so I don't want to say down, but in a sense you're bound. You're bound. Like you think everybody's out to get you. You think you got to cover yourself. You got, as long as I got Jesus, I don't need nobody. I'm telling you, yes, Jesus is a good father, but he's a father who has many sons. And you have many brothers and sisters in the Lord. They may be a little crazy, but I'm saying, like, some of us are trying to pursue holistic living. Mm-hmm. And I think that should be the main goal for that simple cause right there.
Absolutely. And so I think that we are coming to a close on this episode. But some of the things that we want to leave with you is this.
Yeah.
Therapy.
Yes.
It is time for us to stop passing down these dysfunctional things that happen to us as children to our generations after us, because it's killing our legacy. It's killing us.
Yeah.
If there's anything I can stress, look, guys, we have to be careful what we do in front of our children.
Right.
We have to be careful what we're saying to other people's children.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing too, but we don't have enough time to get into that. But guys, we let's just be more aware. Let's be the generation, or whoever's listening, let it be a personal goal to you to not only deal with what happened to you as a child.
Yeah.
And it may be the worst thing, it may be the most simple thing, but it affected you.
Yeah.
And you had an emotion towards it.
Yeah.
And
you have to let it go.
And you have to let it go. If God is our Father, he has to deal with us on that child level.
Yep.
Because how can we view him as a father when we have internal battles and internal bitterness and rejection from our fathers?
Yeah.
How do we expect to trust God the Father? So guys, I really hope and pray that you took something from today and that you begin to release that childhood trauma that happened to you. Yes, you have to talk about it. Yes, you if you need to get a therapist, if you need to call a hotline, if you just need to call a close friend, or if you need to talk to your husband, hey, look, this is why I do things like this, because this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
Do it. That's the beginning step. And I promise you that it will start getting easier.
And so you need to hold your friend, hold your circle to hold you accountable.
Absolutely.
Like literally. And if they not, it's time to leave.
It's time to let them
go. Like seriously, because your life is so important.
Absolutely.
And the things that you're going to be walking into for the coming years is very important. And I believe, to get yourself to the place that you need to be, you have to surround yourself with a healthy circle that's going to hold you accountable.
Absolutely.
And that's not going to that's not going to keep coaching you into this level of dysfunction that you've been living in. It's like, okay, we have mastered dysfunctional living. It's called dysfunctional functional living.
Yep.
Like, you have dysfunction very well to where people who may not be aware of those attributes, they'll just be like, oh, you're just normal. And you're really not. It's time out for that. So it's like, it's time to receive the healing.
Absolutely.
Be aware of it, get the education that you need. Then you can go change the world.
Absolutely.
Then you can actually be placed in the thing that God called you to be. So.
Absolutely. So guys, we are going to leave with that.
Oh yeah.
We are so glad that you decided to join us on today with this topic, and we will see you guys next Saturday.